Hello folks, it's me, DeMontropolis, and I'll be rounding out Mega Man's first NES trilogy with Mega Man 3, a game released in 1990 and would become another big hit for the franchise. You'd think Capcom would have an easy time developing this game given Mega Man 2's success. However, it's no secret that this game was rushed and released as an unfinished product. This is mainly because there was a new lead supervisor in the team, as the previous one quit his job. The new higher-up was negatively compared for not being as efficient, nor did he understand Mega Man as well as his predecessor. This fact, coupled with other flukes such as the main planner getting lost and members not meeting deadlines, forced the team to release Mega Man 3 on the market before the game was even ready, with the last 2 months especially being turbulent. But finished or not, I'm excited to talk about one of the more interesting Mega Man games out there. So let's get on with it. Mega Man 3. One of the biggest innovations to remember about Mega Man 3 was that it was the first game to introduce the slide, a new technique performed by pressing jump while holding down to burst forward a short distance, and it also lowers your hitbox a bit. It's an excellent mobility move that makes speedrunning and evading attacks easier and more fun, and something that expanded on a gameplay known for its simplicity at the time. Best part about the slide is it gets taken advantage of in the stages. I'll talk more about level design later, but we have several gimmicks, enemies, and boss attacks that are fully aware of your new move. Everything is upped in scale to challenge how well you can utilize the slide, and I love that the game does this. Another big innovative change moving forward is that Mega Man no longer gets random support items as his main utility. Enter Rush the Dog, literally, as he's designed to transform into different vehicles of transportation to suit the player's needs and surpass what all previous utilities already did. You unlock these by beating certain Robot Masters, which include Rush Marine for traveling freely in the water, and Rush Jet for soaring through the skies. There is one Rush module that you do keep at the start of the game, and that's Rush Coil. It's Rush in his normal form, and jumping on top of him will bounce you high. Many stages are quick to remind you of this utility's handiness, and getting one such utility from the start helps expand how you traverse the stages. However, Rush Jet is OP! Unlike every other game going forward, Rush Jet has no limitation and can freely move around in the sky, wherever the player wants. This doesn't sound too bad considering weapon ammo constantly drains when on it, but there is a bug where jumping or not standing on Rush Jet without getting rid of him will not drain ammo, providing a very easy way to delay consumption. It lasts for so long that once you get Rush Jet, nearly every platforming challenge and gimmick set can be scummed by simply flying over and around it. Don't like Yoku blocks? Fly over them. Afraid of spinning tops somehow? Ignore them. Tired of cloud platforms? Rush Jet. It also doesn't help that Rush Jet's unlimited movement undermines Rush Marine almost entirely, as the latter is restricted to water, which is only in 3 stages of the game, cannot delay ammo consumption, and has a much fatter hitbox. Similar to Mega Man 1, this game does not have an opening cinematic detailing the new story, which is unfortunate because what we have is pretty interesting. Dr. Light has a new ambition of creating a massive peacekeeping robot known as Gamma, but in order to maximize his efficiency, he needed to harvest energy from other planets. In order to carry this out, Dr. Light and the reformed Dr. Wily built 7 Robot Masters for the job, the exception being Shadow Man, who is apparently extraterrestrial in origin, but he gets reprogrammed anyway. Eventually, all Robot Masters went haywire and basically go on strike, so it's up to Mega Man to get the energy elements himself. What I don't get about the story is the whole other planets aspect, because outside of Gemini Man stage, none of the stages really deliver on this detail. Top Man stage is a greenhouse with sports lights everywhere, Magnet Man stage takes place at dawn, Snake Man and Hard Man stage have regular blue skies and clouds, while Needle Man stage has those last parts, plus cities and buildings and construction sites. A major character introduced to the series in this game is Proto Man, a mysterious lookalike to Mega Man who introduces himself with a signature whistle tune, and he makes it hard to tell whether he's a friend or a foe. This is mainly because he fights the player across many different stages as a mid-boss, and challenges the player to a one-on-one duel under the alias Breakman. But on the other hand, he opens up passageways for the player, especially in Gemini Man stage, and he also saves Mega Man from the collapsing Wily Castle. It's only until the very end, where upon reading Dr. Light's DLN notepad, that we learn of his origin as Mega Man's forlorn older brother, but that only opens up more questions to ponder about. While the story side of Proto Man is executed well, except for the freaking gnat swimming across the screen and ruining my suspension of disbelief, on the gameplay side of things, not so much. Proto Man's encounters are pitifully easy, even in rugged terrain like in Hard Man stage, and I can't tell if this is done on purpose because Proto Man may not be going at full power, or the developer simply had no idea how to incorporate a freaking shield into any of his fights. Breakman is even more strange. You fight him in an arena with Hard Man graphics, his AI is unchanged, he only takes damage to the Mega Buster, not like it matters anyway, his shots are slightly bigger, and he has less HP than Proto Man does! Just like in Mega Man 2, Mega Man 3 is firing on all cylinders with its soundtrack. Thanks to a variety of catchy tunes that sell the atmosphere of each setting, there's not a single bad song in this game. The title screen theme is one of the greatest of its kind, even though it doesn't have a cutscene to back it up. My personal favorite song would be Snake Man Stage, but other shoutouts would go to Shadow Man Stage, Needle Man Stage, and the staff roll credits. Both boss themes are really good as well, iconic even. This game is also up there with Mega Man 2 in terms of presentation, but more so with how quick and natural the game transitions through scenes. The stage select always slides into and out of the screen from both sides, and even has a cool detail of Mega Man being in the center and having his eyes follow the selected mugshots. The transition from a boss getting defeated, to having a victory jingle, to absorbing the weapon, to displaying it in the pause menu, to teleporting right into weapon get, and back to the stage select, clocks right under 30 seconds, which is unreal given how much information you receive from the entire sequence. It's also the first game where Mega Man actually absorbs the weapon, instead of just leaving. If there's one faulty thing about Mega Man 3's presentation, it's the new pause menu. It opens up as a tab from below, but the navigation priorities when you're building up your weapons make no sense. For example, if you have Needle Cannon and Top Spin, you would think pressing right from Needle Cannon would take you to Top Spin, right? No! You have to press down to get to Top Spin. And it is extremely easy to burn an E-Tank by accident because your cursor skipped over the weapon you wanted. This is because pressing up and down will shift the column you're in, which is weird, and it's the only way to get your cursor, on another example, to Spark Shock or Shadow Blade if you don't have Search Snake, because pressing right from next takes you to Rush Coil first. It is not fun. As mentioned at the start, Mega Man 3 was put on the market before it was fully ready, and while it's still perfectly playable, you can tell it was rushed in many areas. There are a lot of bugs and glitches inside the cracks, and most of them you might find on accident. To name a few, there's a bug where Mega Man will flicker forever after getting out of a pause menu during iframes. The stage select is freaking out just above Shadow Man, and switching to another weapon while a buster shot from a rush module is on screen will make that shot deal weapon damage from the one you just equipped. However, there are more significant bugs that can impact your experience. Enemy and projectile hitboxes are huge and overinflated throughout the game. Standing too far right on the gray tubes that release cloud platforms will get you booted off. You can access Rush Marine and Rush Jet early before you actually unlock them by selecting an invisible weapon bar and filling it up. You can skip a cutscene in Gemini Man stage which will turn off the music and glitch the Pen makers, and Mega Man moonwalks into position after beating certain bosses. Lastly, the game being rushed also meant there was a lot of content that went unused, like Rush was going to have a drill mode that could dig underground. What sucks even more is that your controls are not fully polished and can be troublesome to wrestle with. One issue is when Mega Man is walking in one direction and you try to turn around, the game does not recognize this command and simply won't turn you around unless you're stationary, which makes it very finicky in certain boss fights that require a lot of turning, like Hard Man and Needle Man. Another big issue is for whatever reason, your shooting inputs can get eaten and Mega Man simply just sits there. What's even more frustrating is that despite Mega Man not shooting in this case, opponents like Gemini Man, who react to your shots, will still react to the button being pressed. Mega Man 3's level design is some of the most fast-paced in the whole series. Enemies are faster and trickier to avoid, and it's not uncommon to face groups of enemies that swarm you in different angles. Gimmicks and hazards are more complex, given you have a slide, and they tend to be combined with enemies in some of the game's trickier platforming sections. Overall, the level design is at its best in the Robot Master stages, as each stage has their own combos of enemies and gimmicks to deal with, most of which are unique to those stages and make the stage stand out. Snake Man stage is a tower full of intertwining tubes that are actually the bodies of snake robots attacking you from all angles. Most of the hallways in Gemini Man's inner caverns are blocked by eggs and require you to carve a hole through them, even though they'll release enemies. Sparkman stage has pink platforms that rise upwards to crush you in between spikes, and the challenge is increased when they're combined with Nuttons and Boltons. Needleman stage features a few pointy obstacles, such as hairy hedgehogs and needle presses jutting out of the ceiling and floor, and Magnet Man stage has machines that pull you in with the magnetic force, introduced in enemy combat and later used in tandem with Yoku blocks. While Mega Man 2 only had one mid-boss in the form of hot dogs, Mega Man 3 goes all in and truly sets the standard for mid-bosses. In addition to fighting Proto Man across multiple stages, we have grander mid-bosses like Big Snakey and Tama the Cat. While they aren't too difficult to defeat, given they only have 10 hit points each and don't do a lot of damage, their attacks are tricky to dodge and likely to wear you down if you don't keep up. My favorite mid-boss would be Giant Metal. First seen inside construction crates in Needleman stage, they rise out of the ground in the revisited stage as souped up versions of typical Mets, shooting massive three-way balls and deploying Mets to attack you. Best thing about them is they can be killed very quickly before they start attacking, but the most damaging weapons are not easy to use and require some finesse to pull off. Mega Man 3 is the only game to feature question tanks, which make for a fun gambling collectible. Shooting them will drop anything in the game, from small energy, health or weapon ammo, to big energy, to 1-ups to even E-tanks. It's always fun to have your excitement just skyrocket when you got something you really wanted, and I honestly prefer question tanks over how the next trilogy of Mega Man games will handle its successor, but that's a story for another review. I also like the relatively even ratio of valuable goodies to find. The number of 1-ups to E-tanks to question tanks is actually pretty solid. While there are slightly more tanks than 1-ups, there are quite a lot of places where getting 1-ups from enemies is common, especially with the pole legs in Gemini Man stage. One playthrough I did Gemini Man stage first, and I happened to get 4 1-ups from enemy drops, and since the stage already gives you 2 1-ups just lying around in the stage, I got out of there going from 4 extra lives to 8. This is also, unfortunately, the last Mega Man game to have your 1-up counter go into double digits, which is a shame because I always like seeing how many 1-ups I can rack up in a playthrough. There's also a cool feature to note in that the second controller can hold inputs to perform some wacky features, and I'm not exactly sure if it was a debug mode accidentally left in the game. For some example, holding right will allow Mega Man to do a super jump that reaches the height of the screen and makes bottomless pits safe to walk on, while holding up and jump will stop time but still allow Mega Man to shoot the buster. I've never experienced these myself, but if you ever want to mess around in this game, here's your chance. Mega Man 3 continues the trend of introducing more iconic Robot Masters to the series, and this might be one of my favorite casts of Robot Masters collectively. You can't go wrong with the Ninja Shadow Man, who mirrors your sliding. Magnet Man somehow makes a magnet-wearing dude look sleek and deadly. Needleman is always angry, and you'll certainly feel his wrath in battle. And my boy Snake Man, wearing a robotic snake as a helmet, but his head is also inside the jaws of the helmet. It's so cool. Mega Man 3 has a few boss fights that continue the fast-paced nature from Mega Man 2, and blend it well with the new ability to slide. Gemini Man works with a clone to loop around the arena, and demands precise shot timings if you want to defeat him as quickly quickly as possible, and he'll switch up strategies once his clone is destroyed. Magnet Man, while weak to the Buster, wastes no time jumping around and throwing attacks everywhere to support his defense and offense. Hardman may not move a lot, but his fists are tough to dodge, and the sheer power of his body slam can terrify the untrained. My personal favorite boss fight of the game would go to Needle Man. He can be firing waves upon waves of needles, but has no problem getting up close for a nasty headbutt or trying to juke you at your own game. As with before, short boss iframes really help strengthen the fun of taking these guys down as quickly as possible. Another thing I like about Mega Man 3's bosses is that it carries over the diverse weakness chain that Mega Man 2 had, so much so that there are 2 separate weakness loops now. Even outside of the weakness loops, the Robot Masters have many secondary weaknesses, to the point where you can experiment with a random weapon of choice and it will usually prove helpful against a boss, with Gemini Man being the biggest example here. Magnet Man has 2 big weaknesses that could defeat him in 4 hits, and Hard Man has the most weapon immunities compared to the others, which makes sense given he has the toughest armor. One of the most interesting aspects is that all the Robot Masters have self-weaknesses, and universally go down in 7 hits to them. Several of these fights actually change in how you fight them this way, with Top Man ironically being the hardest boss to beat, using his own weapon against him. Using Topspin, I have yet to defeat him without the help of an E-Tank. However, there are several bosses that are simply built to be unfair. The biggest offender is Shadow Man. Not only is he always trying to close the distance on you, but the 2 attacks he can use are chosen purely from a coin flip and are so difficult to anticipate from each other that trying to dodge one attack leaves you to get hit by the other attack. Sparkman has a solid pattern on his own, but there is one platform on the left that's too high up, meaning if he attacks while he has you cornered on that platform, damage is inevitable. Yellow Devil Mark II is not bad in my opinion. I'd say he's the best fortress boss in the game, but he does have an annoying bug where during the wave attack, his body collision appears on the other side before he fully forms. Imagine getting jumped by an invisible attack that kills in 4 hits. The holograph Megamans have only 1 attack, and it's to spam buster shots at your position, even though they aren't facing your direction. Wily Machine 3 has this same issue, but with the addition of having a really high weak point that only drops into range for half of a second, making for an extremely rigid buster-only fight if you do not use its weakness or screw logic with Rush Jet. But don't even get me started on the Dock robots. I'll save them for later. On the opposite side, there's many bosses that are just way too easy. Top Man's pattern speaks for itself. Very repetitive and easy to dodge, plus he's weak to the buster. Snake Man just goes back and forth forever and is easily avoidable once you learn how to control the center. The Kamagoro Maker's only attack is to spawn turtles that die in 1 hit to several weapons. Just equip Topspin and you're guaranteed victory. The water currents that shoot out of pipes don't do much to support them either, just serving as minor inconveniences. The final boss itself, Gamma, also comes off as a bit anticlimactic, both in difficulty and in execution. His first form is a rip-off of an existing enemy's code, and his biggest weakness can end the fight in seconds. Mega Man 3's weapons are viable against many enemies in the game, whether it be sheer strength or the unique trajectories they have. Surge Snake can scale terrain, can be fired in spurts, and benefits a lot from the level layout of certain stages, such as Top Man's and Shadow Man's stages. Hard Knuckle is a slow weapon, but it packs a serious punch against some of the game's tougher enemies, and can knock out most of the weaker enemies easily as well. Gemini Laser and Shadow Blade are also strong weapons in their own right. The former can be used in creative ways by bouncing it off the terrain to hit enemies, and the latter is like a balanced metal blade, sacrificing range and projectile limit to still remain a powerful weapon. My favorite would have to be Magnet Missile. The original guided projectile is highly respected due to its accuracy and power at the cost of ammo. There are many sections of the game where you could just mow down waves of enemies until you run out of the weapon. However, there are 2 weapons that are barely functionable compared to the rest. The first is Topspin, unique from the rest, in that you can only use it in the air, turning Mega Man into a spinning hitbox of death. However, the weapon functions in a black and white kind of way. Either the enemy dies instantly or the player gets hurt. Getting hurt is guaranteed in boss fights, and the weapon consumes 1 ammo for each time you land a hit. So trying to hit a boss like Shadow Man while you're under iframes could cause the weapon to drain a ludicrous amount of ammo, potentially sapping the entire thing in one use. The second is Spark Shock, a spiritual successor to Ice Slasher, in that you can paralyze enemies and switch to another weapon. Oh wait, you can't switch to another weapon. This is because the paralysis is shown by a static effect, and the game doesn't allow you to pause when a weapon is on screen. Combine this with the fact that most of Mega Man 3's level design puts enemies right in front of your path with little room to get around them, and we have a contender for one of the worst weapons in Mega Man history. And the last weapon, Needle Cannon, might be one of the most boring weapons ever conceived for a Mega Man game. You simply hold the shoot button to spray needles, and while they go up and down slightly, they are one-to-one with the Buster shots in pretty much all aspects. It does the same damage as the Buster to enemies, it's the only other weapon that can destroy pole eggs in Gemini Man stage, and it's only distinguished by being a weakness to certain bosses. The mechanic of holding the button is kinda nice. I like to think of it as an early attempt at accessibility for autofire. After you beat the 8 Robot Masters, instead of going to Dr. Wily's castle right away, you have to put up with new adversaries, the Doc Robots. These guys don't have attacks of their own, but are specialized in copying Robot Master data and following their attack patterns. Specifically, they use all of the Robot Masters from Mega Man 2. Not only is it impressive that all 8 bosses are brought back in a new game with new mechanics to face them with, such as the slide and rush, but you have new weapons to battle them with, and most of the weaknesses actually make sense within the context of a boss's pattern. The Doc Robots are located in 4 of the Robot Master stages, requiring you to revisit them, and they have 2 Doc Robots in each, one stationed at the halfway point and one at the very end. However, the stages have undergone significant changes thanks to your previous visit, such as being worn down, or in Needleman's case, taking place at nighttime, and many of which feature new kinds of challenges, remix setups from your previous visit of the stage, or set new obstacles entirely. Shadow Man stage has these red platforms that will open up to drop you as soon as you touch them. Sparkman stage has orange conveyor belts, and Needleman stage has new Mets that utilize propellers, and a unique mid-boss which we talked about earlier. Unfortunately, the Doc Robot fights themselves are not too great. They amount to either being less interesting or more cheap than before, and I got bones to pick with all of them. Although Doc Crash is smarter with aiming, his timer of attacking on his own does not reset when he jumps at the player's command, meaning he can now just attack all of a sudden. Same thing happens with Doc Metal, and he is missing a conveyor belt in his fight. Doc Air's tornadoes still have undodgeable patterns, but they start lagging the game when they move for some reason, a problem that didn't exist when fighting the real Airman. Doc Quick's damage values have now been extremified. His boomerangs do less damage, but his contact can now kill you in 4 hits. His weaknesses are the 2 most awkward weapons to use against fast opponents, and the bigger hitbox makes it more challenging to jump over him, a trait that also applies to Doc Wood and Doc Flash. The former's leaf shield is now nearly pixel perfect to jump over because of this, and the timing is mixed up so the falling leaves get in your way when you try jumping over the shield. Doc Flash has a new layout that makes it impossible to jump over him within the first 3 seconds, with Rush being the only way to escape damage here. Doc Bubble is vulnerable to a new exploit that involves hovering above the ground with Rush Marine or Rush Jet after he lands, which will almost guarantee victory. This is because his pattern only resets when you touch the ground, a mechanic carried over from the real Bubble Man's fight, though it couldn't be exploited in that game. Lastly, the timing to shoot Doc Heat before he throws an atomic fire volley is much shorter, to the point where you have to throw a Shadow Blade in a specific way to stop him from throwing fireballs. After dealing with the Doc Robots and Breakman, a plot twist to nobody occurs and Wily steals Gamma, intending to power him up for another world domination scheme. The Wily Castle's design in this game is pretty cool, standing as one of the more memorable ones alongside Mega Man 2's. However, the map outline only goes along the rightwards perimeter of the castle and ascends upwards, which doesn't even try to resemble the paths you actually take in the castle. For example, Wily 1 has you entering the castle from the sewer line below, yet the outline here doesn't show any descension into a lower area underneath the castle. It's typical for the Fortress stages in Mega Man games to be more forgettable or unfocused compared to the Robot Master stages, as the latter stages are tied to the faces of the game. However, Mega Man 3's Wily stages are on a whole new level. Every stage is extremely short and typically takes 1 to 2 minutes to get from the start to the boss gate with or without distractions. These stages also dump the player with 1-ups, E-tanks, and weapon energy all throughout. The first 3 stages have 4 1-ups and 5 E-tanks just lying around in the open with no real protection. And weapon energy is so abundant that even if you only use weapons across the entire castle, you still won't be able to run out. There isn't too much to write about for the level design, as Wily 2 and 3 reuse enemy combos from Hardman's and Shadow Man stage respectively. Wily 4 does feature a new enemy exclusive to that stage, the Junk Golems, before the rematches, and Wily 5 and 6 are simple fill-up rooms before the final bosses. You can tell this was rushed simply from the fact that Wily 6 has a big health pickup, which makes no sense because your health gets restored to full energy when you first enter a stage. With all of the stages discussed, there is one weird aspect about them. There are a lot of spaces where the player is forced to use Rush to progress, the most out of any Mega Man game. I could understand why, as this is Rush's first game and demanding usage in some areas is necessary to get players to understand how Rush Coil works. Thankfully, only 2 Robot Master stages have forced areas, Gemini Man's and Hard Man's stage, but later on it starts to become a problem, because if you don't have enough Rush to pass one of these areas, you have to either grind on enemies for ammo, game over, or reset the game thanks to a soft lock. Such areas include the start of Doc Sparks stage, the room right after Doc Flash's boss fight, the start of Wily 3, and so on. The most infamous area though is the Rush Jet section in Doc Needle stage. There is a wide pit that has to be crossed with Rush Jet, and there are several big weapon pickups throughout to keep you replenished during your ride. However, when you die, any pickups that you collected won't respawn, so if you die too many times, you'll run out of Rush Jet. The final boss of this game is pretty cool though. After defeating Wily Machine 3 and finding out that the pilot was a decoy, you tackle the Titanic Gamma. As stated before, his patterns are not very complex, as the blue brain enemy of his functions just like the new Shotman enemies. Once you defeat that, Wily straps on a helmet and takes control of the head. In this new form, Gamma shoots energy from his mouth and attacks with a spike-covered fist, which you need to jump on to reach the platforms needed to deal damage. Gamma's unique in that he packs resilience to a lot of weapons, including the Mega Buster, and each phase can only be damaged by 2 weapons each. The first phase is easily disposed of, but the second phase has more interesting weaknesses. The first is Search Snake, which is a tricky weapon to use as it drops to the floor quickly, and you can only get in 1 hit if you want to stay on the upper platform. The second is Topspin, which can take advantage of the boss's lack of iframes to do massive damage or defeat Gamma in one glorious attack. Given the weapon's nature, it's a ballsy move to jump off the platform and pray it works, but it does make for a very flashy finisher. In the end, I've come up with 19 pros and 15 cons, barely passing as a positive score. Even though the game is full of jank and part of its unpolished nature, there's definitely a lot to enjoy here. It introduced the slide, rush, Proto Man, and the gameplay holds many challenges that are fun to tackle and fun to speed through, enough challenges that'll keep you invested for a while. I'd recommend it, but just be cautious of what the game could throw at you. So with that, I'm going to give Mega Man 3 a rating of 6 out of 10. Decent. And that's the end of this review, which concludes my 100 subscriber poll. If you like what you saw, consider giving a like and subscribe to my channel. As per usual, I have the other Mega Man reviews and my Discord server in the description, so consider joining if you like my content. And speaking of content, I'm thinking about trying something new for my next video, in the sense that it won't be a review. I'm not sure how quickly I can put it out, since I landed myself a new job for the summer, and that'll take up some time. But with that said, I'll be signing off. Take care, folks.